What's going on, everyone? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're in class. Hope you don't have to watch this at home. But if you are watching at home, hello. In today's quick English lesson, it should be under 10 minutes. We are going to talk about the rest of the conflicts that you might see pretty much anywhere in a book you read, in a short story, in a television show, in a movie. These are pretty universal. And there is a Google form. It's available on Google Classroom, not due until next Friday. So far, we have two assignments. The first day questionnaire, which is due tomorrow. I'm recording this on Thursday, which is due tomorrow. And then next Friday, we have something called exposition and conflict. You'll see it right on Google Classroom. And probably at some point next week, we'll have one more assignment, maybe like on a Tuesday, do that Friday. And it's about those words right over there. Those words that we've been reading during Max Swings to the Fences. We'll talk about that later. Today is all about conflict. And this Google form right here, I can make myself small because I'm not that important. And if you see right here, we talked number 3, person versus person. We did that yesterday. Person versus self, I think pretty difficult to identify because that antagonist is not on the page, but doable. So today, what I would like to talk about is person versus society, person versus nature, person versus supernatural. There are only how many? 5 we're talking about? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is one more. There is one more some teachers will introduce, and I will pause that here in case anybody knows that other one. We're not covering it because it could kind of fit into the nature part, but I understand why some other teachers have this as a separate one. And some of us have been dealing with that conflict already this school year. So I'll pause it and we can talk and then we'll come back. Okay. So hopefully I paused it. In case you're watching at home or just to hear it again, some teachers will teach person versus technology. It's kind of a more recent one, like in the last 20 years. I've been teaching for so long that this one really didn't exist back in 2002 when I started teaching. But since then, it is starting to be introduced because it doesn't quite, it sort of could be nature. It could be like person or self, like they can't work it themselves. If you have like a new phone and, you could say, oh, I can't get over it. It's my fault. But technology works too. So, but that's just a real quick explanation on technology. Let's talk about this next one, the hard person versus self, pretty hard, but also person versus society is pretty hard. So how about one more time, how about I pause it here just in case, depending on your 7th grade or 6th grade teachers, the society one. I'll pause it right here. All right, and we're back. And so hopefully somebody said things like homophobia would be fall into society. Hopefully it's getting better now, but at one time, certainly, it was a big deal. Racism, maybe for people who are overweight, possibly religion. So when person versus society happens, it's the whole society doesn't agree with the way this person lives their life. Yeah. So I was gonna say something else, but we'll save that for later. But right now, hopefully society is getting better, so there isn't as much racism. Still exists. There isn't as much homophobia. So I remember when I was a kid, right? If you've ever heard the story about this guy named Ryan White, Ryan White was about your age in the early 80s, right when AIDS started to become a thing. And he got AIDS through a blood transfusion. And this was like right at the beginning of AIDS, and people didn't understand how it worked and all that. So he got some tainted blood. And so he was like a 13, 14-year-old kid trying to go to school, diagnosed with AIDS, but he was kicked out of school. They wouldn't let him in because they were worried, like, oh, if he shared a sandwich with somebody or if he coughed on them very early, and there were no cures. It was a very scary time. So that would be an example of person versus society, where everybody in the society is against them, like things are keeping them down. Certainly, and we will talk about this throughout the year, the civil rights movement in the 60s, 1960s, and before, when just rampant racism was in place, and there were actually laws in place to keep people who weren't white down. Like voting rights was a big thing. Like if you were white, you could go in, vote, no problem. If you weren't white, then, oh, we have this test for you. Oh, you have to use, very basic stuff, but you have to use a different water fountain. That would be person versus society. It's interesting when we read stories about person versus society. We will have a short story. It's called The Care and Feeding of Your Baby Killer Unicorn. I need to warn you, though, when we read it, the ending is a little flat. It's not as great as it could be. But it's a story about how unicorn. We'll talk about it later. But that's person versus society. So it is sort of rare, but I think it is a hard one to write about and a hard one to diagnose. But when I mean diagnose, I mean like dissect, like when we take apart a story like we're doing with Max Swings for the Fences. Sometimes the society can be a little tough. Now, how about this? If Max was bullied on a regular basis because he was the new kid, we might have a person versus society on our hands. But I would argue, and see, that's what you have to do in English classes. You have to argue, not like get into an argument, but like try to state your case, provide evidence like a lawyer might. They argue for their clients. So I would argue that the people like Molly at first was really nice to him. Like she was welcoming. Even Logan, if you look back at that, he was like, oh, what position do you play? We could really use a left fielder. Like he was trying to get him into the fold, get him into the society. And then he just did some stupid things. All right. These will not take long. These are a little bit easier, a little more straightforward here. So the next one, let me just bring it up higher. Person versus nature. I mean, let me pause it for the people in the room here, and then we can talk about that first. I'll pause, and then we come back. I pretty much just say probably what we said, talking floods, talking earthquakes. Man, I had a person versus nature event this summer that I will talk about probably when we go over the first day questionnaire, but oh my gosh. So person versus nature is a real thing. I mean, you're out in the desert, dry, no water, living in Maine, like December through March, probably. We're always person versus nature. Sometimes just getting into school without slipping and falling on ice is a thing. And then the last one, we had nature, and now we have supernatural. So I can pause that here. We can talk. And so person versus supernatural is pretty much anything that isn't natural. So aliens, as far as I know, they really haven't had much contact with our planet for real. But if they ever do, that would be probably supernatural. It's not natural to Earth. So I would put aliens into supernatural. We got Halloween coming up in a few weeks. Come on, witches, all that stuff. Cool. If there are any questions about it, let me know. But I think that's going to do it for today's lesson on conflict.